Hi guys. So I've been promising to make this video for a long time. I'm finally getting around to it. I am going to demonstrate how I use liquid glass on my painted products, signs, and other things to just add a little dimension and a little texture to your finished result. It gives you this nice glossy layer, and it even sometimes pulls in some of the char from the side of a laser cut design, mixes in with the paint. It just looks really pretty when it's finished. And a lot of my customers love it. And lately, all of the signs that I sell, people have been requesting it. So I'm going to show you how I apply it. This is the product. It's made by a Canadian company, and I know it's a little hard to find sometimes here in the US right now. It's only sold at a couple of stores. Dick Blick art supply stores carry it both in-store and online, and also Premium Artist Supply. It says that it's a pouring medium. I'm not exactly sure what that is. I think that's used in resin art. I'm not a resin artist, so I'm not sure what a pouring medium really is, but for my purposes, just as a final layer, it dries super hard and permanent, and it's really beautiful. So I use it straight out of the bottle, no mixing. So if you can't find it, these two products are not bad. I prefer the glossy accents. You can find these easily at Michael's or Joann or any of your craft stores, probably Amazon. The Mod Podge Dimensional Magic is not my favorite for this. It's just a lot thinner. I don't know if you can see the movement, but you'll definitely get gloss from it, but just not that same thick texture. The glossy accents is a lot closer to liquid glass. It will give you a little bit more thickness. So those are okay. And I will use this if I can't find liquid glass, but luckily I have a nice big stash of it right now. Okay, so I use a glass bowl, and I will just pour out, I don't know, maybe a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch in the bottom of my bowl. I really don't use a lot at a time because as you're working with it, it does sort of thicken up. It's starting to set a little, and I like the texture of it straight from the bottle. It's thinner and easier to move around. So you can see I have a few bubbles in there. I'm not really too worried about it. You can push the bubbles out. I'll show you that as I'm working. But I just keep refilling as I need it. So as far as tools, I'll just grab a whole bunch of brushes. I like to use a thinner brush for most of my smaller parts. Obviously, you don't want to use a big brush, but these big sections, I don't know if you can see that. I already did this part, but these bigger sections, I like to use sort of an angled brush. That's just my preference. You can use whatever you want, but kind of important is having some sort of a tool. I use these little picks, these little weeding tools. They're really good for getting into these tiny little areas that you don't really want to bring a brush in there because you'll end up pushing it onto the border piece. And I don't like to get any outside of my inner pieces. So any of these will work. Even a toothpick works. Whatever you have that's got a really tiny point. Even an X-Acto knife will do. Okay, let's get started. So I did this big piece already. I'm gonna move my camera down. And for that, I use this bigger brush. I'll probably use that same brush because this piece is a little bit bigger and it just gives you more coverage. So when I'm pulling it from the glass jar, I like to bring a huge glob. I just turn my brush and I keep on as much as I possibly can. And then I'm just going to let that drop right onto my piece. Make sure I'm really showing you. I work one section at a time. I like to work just one area at a time because it is going to start setting a little bit. You still have some freedom of time with doing this. It's not setting quickly, but enough that you don't want to start on one side and then another side, because then you're going to have the whole middle section to fill in. So it's better to just keep working from one area. So I'm basically just grabbing a bunch, letting it drop on here in a big drip. And I know I say that I paint it on, but it's really not painting because you're not pulling strokes like you do with paint. You're just moving it and actually kind of dabbing it and letting it flow right to the areas that you want it. And if you're not getting right into the very corner, it's okay. You can use your tool later to fix that. So I make sure I get to the very edge of it, because when it dries, you do see the parts that aren't even and like little gaps that would be on the sides. So I like it to be a perfect line. Okay, so I'm just going to keep pulling more and more onto my piece. It looks like you're almost using so much that it'll flood over, but it just doesn't. I don't know if it's just the way I design my pieces. I always have this border around it, and that lets it have sort of a natural barrier. And honestly, if it gets onto your border piece, you can just wipe it off, scrape it off with your fingernail or a tool, and then you can always touch your paint up later. I use a gold paint, and it's spray paint, but I'll just spray it on a little piece of wood and then use a tiny brush and touch up. So I'm going to stop from flooding this area, and I'm just going to use my tool and pull out a couple of these little bubbles I see. They're really easy to get rid of. And I'm going to pull it right to these tiny corners because I really want a perfect edge. It's just kind of pulling it and pushing it. It's a very forgiving texture or product, I guess. It's self-leveling. As it dries, it's going to dry very even, especially if you're applying it, with the same amount, which for me is very thick. That's how I feel like I get my best results. So again, I'm just going to let it drip on there, and I'm just going to keep pushing it and guiding it where I want it to go. You can see I made some painting mistakes here. It's okay. This was just a little sample piece I had laying around. If I was doing this for a customer, I would make sure all my painting was perfect first. So you're really just flooding these areas. A lot of people have told me it's just like doing cookies, royal icing, and I've done them a few times. It is very similar to that. Okay, so you just want to make sure you're really using a lot. I feel like as it dries and it self-levels, the more you have on there, the nicer your finish will be, the more smooth and consistent. Okay. So again, I will probably stop right here and use my little pick and pull to these corners and fix my edges to make sure I'm getting it perfectly straight lines so that when it dries, you're not seeing little areas there that you missed. And also I'll take this opportunity to pop any bubbles or pull out any bubbles to the edges so that you won't see them when they dry. All right. Pulling more, letting it drip. And then just really guiding it to where you want it to go. Filling in the area. I got a little bit on my gold there, so I'll just use my tool, kind of scrape that off. Pulling more on my brush and dripping. Dripping and pulling it. That's really the whole process. Okay. Just finish up this piece. I try not to move my brush in the glass container very much because I don't want to create more bubbles. I see that there's something in there, a little black fleck. Don't know where that came from, but I'm going to use my tool and pull that out. You obviously want it to dry as clear as possible. If I see a little fuzzy or a little fleck of dust or something, I'll just stop and grab my tool and pull that out. No problem. So now, because I'm getting closer in, I'll probably grab a different paintbrush with a little bit of a finer tip. I want to make sure I'm not using a brush that's too big for that area. Again, just letting it drip in there. Pulling it where it needs to go. And grabbing my tool. Kind of just pull it into those very angled corners. And it looks like we got good coverage. Oh, I can see here I didn't get right to the edge, so I still have time. It is starting to set, but you still have, I would say a piece like this I would finish in just really, if I wasn't doing this on camera, I would do it very quickly, just a few minutes. I can do a big piece like this really in about 10-15 minutes. So I'm gonna go in and fix this while I can, because I know if it dries and it's not perfectly aligned on the edge, it's gonna drive me crazy. So better to fix it now, because once it's dry, it's a lot more difficult to go in and touch up. I almost never do. Okay. And I'll hold it and move it around in the light so I can really get a good look and see if there's anything that should be touched up, and it looks fine. So then I'm going to start moving on to some of the painted inner pieces. Again, I am going to grab a bunch on my brush, let it drip right in there. I'll put some in a different area if I think adding it over here is going to make a mess. So just put it in there. This is a very thick piece, a lot of liquid glass in here. I probably put a little bit too much, but it's okay. Just gonna work with it, push it around. It's kind of finding that perfect balance between as much as the piece can take, but not going outside of the border. And all of my designs have a border around them. I don't even know if I draw like that intentionally. It's just kind of the way I draw. So it's really conducive to using liquid glass because it gives you this edge that gives you like a natural barrier to the liquid glass not spilling out. And I never really go onto the border piece. I don't liquid glass the entire piece. I like just the painted sections, the inner painted. Okay. Moving on. I can see right now there's a bubble right there in the center. I'll pull that out later. More. Okay, again, I'm going to stop right here and I'm going to grab my tool and I'm going to fix this bubble I see. I just popped it. I'm going to pull this into my angled corner. And kind of move my sign around or my piece around and get a good look at it in different light to make sure I've covered the piece the way I want it. Looks good. So I would just continue doing that with all of these pieces, but I want to move on to this white piece because white can be problematic. Sometimes I do a white piece and it's perfect. It stays white. It doesn't turn brown. Other times I will do a white piece and it gets ruined because it just turns brown. It pulls in the char from the edge of your laser cut piece. You know, the laser burns the edges, so that's all charred, and the liquid glass will sometimes pull that into your piece. If that bothers you, and it bothers me for certain things, if I want, like if I'm doing a cloud and I want it perfectly white, I've tested some different things that I can do to avoid that happening. What I just found on a piece that I did that had some big clouds on it, I painted them first with chalk paint and then I sanded it off, but I'm able to, because I have the border around my piece, I'm able to hit those edges and it doesn't matter if they look perfect or not because you're not going to see them sitting inside the border. You won't see these sides of this piece. So I'll hit, you know, a little bit extra attention on the sides of the piece just to kind of give it a sealant, a little bit of coverage. It doesn't have to be perfect. So what I did was the chalk paint and then I sanded it off so that it just was a layer. It wasn't perfect. And then I hit it with white spray paint. And I find that that really helps with coverage also. It gives you a nice, super smooth finish. And then when I did the liquid glass on it, I got no brown at all. It was perfect. Sometimes I don't mind, like this piece, because I want it to have almost a vintagey feel. I don't mind if this is gonna pull in some brown. We're gonna have to see because almost every time I do it, I get a different result from a white. So we'll see how this one does. But what I'm talking about with the charring, you can almost see it starting to happen here. Let me get this really good in the camera so you can see. I don't know if you can really tell on these pieces here. I'm getting a little bit of browning on the edges of the light pink. I actually really like it. Sometimes it doesn't bother me at all, so I'm happy with that. And even if I get it on this white, that's okay too. So I'm gonna start here. Again, just getting a lot on my brush and dripping it on there. Pushing it to the edges. There's a big bubble, it's okay. I'm not really worried about how this piece will turn out because this is just for demonstration. It's not actually in order. I have another sign I have to do today and it has white on it, so I'm a little nervous because I want it to stay white. We'll see. Okay. I can see a big bubble right there. I'll probably pause in a second and go in with my tool and fix that. Pulling more product on here. Okay. Get this one petal done and then see how I just use so much. It almost feels like the piece won't be able to hold it all. But it really does, and it's such a forgiving product with the way it self-levels as it dries. It's going to give such a smooth layer. If you use enough of it, you won't see any divots or inconsistent areas. It should all be very, very smooth. Okay, this is a good time to grab my tool and go in here. I'm going to pop this bubble. There he goes. Pull it to the edges. These tools are great. These are like weeding tools. I used to use this back in my vinyl days, and I think I got them at Harbor Freight for a few dollars, a big set of them. They're just great. Okay, I can see here, I definitely pulled too much on. And it got onto this line. I said it never happens to me, and of course, while I'm recording, the first time that's ever happened to me. But I am not worried. I'm gonna drag this away. I think I'll be able to save that by pulling it out of that area, pushing it over here. I think I just went a little bit too much with it, but I'm gonna fix it. You can see how it's already thickening up, and that's almost a good thing at this point because it's going to help me fix my mistake here. Pull it all away from this area. Let it fill in here. Just guide it. I'm kind of glad I made this mistake because I can show you how easy it is to fix. It's starting to set, and that's going to work in my favor. I'm just going to keep pulling it off of this piece. Making it really thin here on my border piece. And then what I'll do after this dries is just go in and touch up this gold paint right here because I'm scraping it away a little bit. Okay, that's not too bad. That would bother me if this was somebody's order. I would probably redo it, honestly, but it's fine. So, again, I'm gonna go in and just strip some on. I'm gonna be a little bit more careful not to go too crazy and add too much. You can see there's some fuzzies and dust on this. Okay, so I'm gonna grab my tool again because I can see there's a little hair here, a little fuzzy. I do not want anything in my liquid glass because that would drive me crazy. Okay. Just using my tool to make sure I'm getting perfectly to the edges. I actually want to put a little more product on here. You'll get a sense for it as you get used to using it, how much works and how much is too much or not enough. And you can move it around, taking some from the areas that have a lot, adding it to the areas that are thin. Trying to be very, very consistent with your coverage because it will matter when it dries. I'm gonna need a tiny little bit more in this area here, so I'll add it over here and then pull it. There we go. Taking it from here where there's a lot and pulling it into that middle section. I'm not doing my best work here, but it's okay. This is just a sample piece I had around. When I'm doing this for a customer's piece, I'm really, really focused and I like it to be absolutely perfect. So again, as it's drying, you can see that the color is changing here on these petals and it's pulling in some of that char. I like it. There are ways you can avoid that from happening, but it's really not a problem for the most part. I'm just going to add to a couple of these other petals so that you can see the color as I'm doing it. And then I will probably stop here because this piece would take a while to do. So let's just do maybe this coral area. And we'll see what kind of color that ends up being. Dropping a lot on there. Whoa. I wasn't paying attention. I added too much there, so we have to fix this. It's okay. Pull it away from that area so that I can work with what's there. Fix it. And I see a big bubble in there. We're going to go in and get rid of him. Okay. Grab my little tool, pop that bubble, and start moving this. Sometimes this liquid glass just makes these colors so beautiful. Like I think I already love the color when it's painted, but it just makes it a color you can't really achieve that easily with paint because it blends in some of the browns and just gives the edges like a slight tinge of different color. I just think it looks so nice. Okay. Get a little bit more. And as I'm pulling this in from my glass container, I can tell it's getting thick right now. This is not really my favorite way of applying it. I like it when it's, like I said, fresh out of the bottle and really thin, easy to move around. It becomes a little bit more difficult when it's getting thick. So probably what I would do at this point is clean out my container. Hopefully I haven't wasted by putting too much in there. And I would start with a new fresh batch of it because it's just starting to get a little more difficult to work with. And it's such an easy product to use that there's no sense, you know, making it more difficult on yourself. So I probably will dump out what I have left in here and go and wash it out. Soap and water, super easy to wash your brushes. You don't have to use any kind of solvents or anything like that. Simple dish soap and water will clean your brushes off, clean your container out. Okay, I'm gonna use my tool. Move this around. And you can already tell on that other petal that I did the difference in the color. So it's definitely going to change the paint color, which I think is really pretty. But if it bothers you and you have a very specific paint color that you're working with and it can't have any variations in it, then you might want to test some different pieces first. Okay, so that's pretty much done, and I'm going to pause here and go and clean out my container.